Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the deeply atmospheric world of 1865 China, drawing right from the historical fiction text, The Mandate of Heaven. We're going to explore a really fascinating but undeniably tragic dynamic: how massive macro-historical geopolitical shifts can force absolutely devastating micro-personal sacrifices on one single impoverished family. Just imagine, for a second, living in a time where the literal survival of your entire lineage depends on these unimaginable physical gambles. Well, that is exactly the reality we're unpacking today. Just listen to this haunting premonition from a peasant woman named Mei-Ling. Her husband, second son, has literally just left their small village for a distant land. Before we even get into the heavy history, we can immediately feel that deep empathy of a wife saying goodbye to her husband. It perfectly bridges the gap between us as modern viewers and the raw 19th century desperation for survival. Mei-Ling doesn't actually know it yet, but her instinct? It's a really dark foreshadowing of the sweeping forces that are about to completely tear her family apart. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, An Empire in Decline. To understand why Mei-Ling's family is so utterly destitute, we have to pull back and look at the broader picture. The years leading up to 1865 paint a stark portrait of an empire in total freefall. For a whole decade, the Taiping Rebellion has just ruined the Great Yangtze Valley. Then, in 1860, foreign powers, who the text refers to as barbarians, humiliate the empire by completely destroying the Summer Palace in Beijing. Even when the rebels are finally kicked out of Nanjing, it's done by Chinese troops trained by British officers. Basically, it proves the foreigners are the ones really calling the shots. And now, in 1865, the emperor is dead, a literal child sits on the throne, and the treasury is completely exhausted. These rapid, successive national humiliations didn't just hurt pride, they starved the local peasants. Mei-Ling's family has absolutely no money left. So, with a farm failing, the family is basically backed into a corner. They're forced to gamble on two parallel, extreme physical sacrifices just to avoid starvation. On one hand, the men are risking their lives crossing the ocean to work on the American railroad, chasing after foreign silver. On the other hand, the women, specifically young girls, must endure the brutal physical mutilation of foot binding just to secure a wealthy husband. Both are agonizing investments made simply to keep the family breathing. And this is so relevant to us today because it clearly shows how staggering economic disparity pushes ordinary families to impossible extremes, no matter what era we're talking about. Which brings us to Section 2, the American Railroad Gamble. Let's zoom in on second son's absolutely agonizing decision. He loves his wife deeply, but he realizes that staying on their ruined farm just means certain starvation. And the lure of the American West has finally reached their village. Imagine hearing these specific incentives that successfully lured destitute Chinese farmers all the way across the ocean to California. There are rumors of this magnificent western continent with beautiful bays and soaring mountains. But more importantly, there are tales of an endless iron dragon, a train belching steam and sparks that needs men to lay its tracks. When a handsome young American merchant shows up offering a generous, immediate advance payment in a literal bag of silver, which is often more money than a peasant could make in several lifetimes at home, well, the temptation is just too much. It's real cash in hand for a starving family. 4. That is the agonizing number of years second son promises the American merchant he will work in California. He takes the bag of silver, leaves it with Mei-Ling to keep the farm afloat, and sets a ticking clock on his family's survival, departing under a cloudy quarter moon. With second son gone, we shift gears to Section 3, the economics of foot binding. We're moving the narrative focus back to China to explore the parallel physical ordeal forced upon his daughter, the exceptionally beautiful Bright Moon. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is the purpose behind all of this? The crucial point is understanding the actual sociology behind foot binding. Lily feet, or the golden lotus, wasn't just some physical aesthetic. It was fundamentally an economic investment. A girl with bound feet becomes a walking status symbol. It physically proves she does not have to work in the fields like a common peasant. For an impoverished family, this is the ultimate gamble. Endure the immense cost and pain of binding the feet so she can attract a rich husband to ultimately financially support the whole family. The text meticulously, and I mean meticulously, explains the brutal mechanics of the binder's method. First, the toenails are trimmed as short as possible. Then the feet soak in hot water to soften up the flesh. Next, the 4 small toes are deliberately folded completely under the foot pad. A wet cloth is then wrapped tightly around the sole and the heel. Finally, as those bandages dry, they shrink, pulling tighter and tighter to intentionally break the arch of the foot into a tiny hoof. It's described almost like embalming a foot. It's a clinical, deeply visceral ordeal that literally takes years to complete. And here's where it gets truly chilling. It's the incredibly cold contrast in how the binder actually views this process. As Bright Moon screams in absolute agony, the binder doesn't see the broken bones as torture. Oh no, she sees it as a highly paid artistic process. She views herself as an artist battling the forces of nature to create a masterpiece. And we absolutely cannot forget this number, 7. At just 7 years old, Bright Moon is told by the binder that her mind has officially entered womanhood. Think about that. She's expected to mentally grow up instantly and endure this excruciating pain solely for her father's financial relief, sacrificing her entire childhood so her family might have a shot at a future. The whole expectation is that her father will come home from America and be so proud of his dutiful daughter. But of course, all those promises of America and the promise of that silver suddenly crumble in Section 4, Tragedy in the Sierras. Let's shift our focus rapidly back to the American West, where chaos strikes completely unexpectedly. Second son's older boy, who actually accompanied him to California, returns home early with some devastating news. They were working up in the high passes of the Sierra Nevada mountains when, suddenly, a section of cliff high above the tracks just splits from the mountain. With this roaring, gravelly hiss, a massive avalanche violently crushes the workers below. Second son is killed instantly under a giant boulder. This leads us right to what is easily the emotional climax of Bright Moon's story. When she's told her father is dead, she doesn't react with quiet grief. She explodes. She realizes her father is gone, and her mutilation was essentially for absolutely nothing. She yells, "I hate my bound feet. You just want me to marry someone rich so I can get money for you." It's just a heart-wrenching moment where this young girl realizes she has been made a cripple to serve a family survival strategy that is now rapidly falling completely apart. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how the family reacts to the fallout. Let's look at Section 5, Survival and Secrets. This tragedy forces a completely ruthless reorganization of the family hierarchy. Elder son, who was supposed to be the nominal head of the family, is lethargic and basically useless. So mother, who was previously just the passive elder, steps up and seizes total financial control. She essentially strips elder son of his authority by ruthlessly selling his expensive opium pipe to buy land. Meanwhile, the son who returned from California steps up from being a junior worker to actually rebuilding the farm's bridges and working the fields. The women completely take charge to ensure they don't starve. But just as things seem to be stabilizing, well, the past has a funny way of catching up with you. Under the light of a quarter moon, which is eerily similar to the very night second son left, a Mandarin official named Shi-Rong suddenly arrives with his entourage. He says he needs a place to stay, but the moment Mei-Ling sees his face, she turns completely pale. You just know this is no random visit. After dinner, Shi-Rong takes Mei-Ling out to the newly built bridge over the pond. Looking down at the reflection of the moon, he softly asks her a really loaded question. "Tell me, have you heard any news of Neo?" Now, Neo is a rebel from Mei-Ling's past, someone who actually gave her silver years ago before completely disappearing during the Taiping Rebellion. And this leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to wrap up on. When a family sacrifices absolutely everything, sending their men to foreign lands, forcing their daughters into physical mutilation, just to survive a crumbling empire, do the ghosts of their past ever truly let them go? What exact price does history demand of the individual? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into the source materials sparked your curiosity to learn more about the incredible human stories hidden within the grand sweep of history.